somatic sensory and somatic visceral. Okay. You have a somatic, so let's do the sensory. Somatic sensory or visceral sensory. So what would be somatic sensory? You might, I'm sure you have never thought about this, but all those skeletal muscles that you identified, embedded in them is a sensory receptor that is picking up messages about what's happening to that muscle. Okay? Those are sensory receptors. We'll look at them a little bit way down the line. They're called muscle spindles. And then, of course, what we're really focusing on is the visceral sensory. Let's get that. I just mentioned one for blood pressure. You've got plenty of visceral sensory receptors inside the body that pick up hunger pains and levels of oxygen, etc. Okay? That's what these are down here. The somatic, the motors, you have somatic motor and visceral motor, but the visceral motor is called the autonomic nervous system. You may have heard of that before. We're going to do a lot more on it on Monday. The autonomic nervous system equals visceral motor. Only visceral motor. So it's got a lot of things that you'll be looking at. You can see a couple things coming up with the systems there. But we'll look at that later. So just remember, autonomic nervous system is visceral motor. All right. I think and we might have mentioned this, but CNS and PNS, what are those? What are the organs of the central nervous system? What are the organs of the central nervous system?
Brain.
Brain and spinal cord. Okay, I did. What are the organs of the peripheral nervous system? Spinal nerves and cranial nerves. That's pretty much it. Okay. Now, what we want to do is, that got that one out pretty quickly. Now we've got two more words that we got to get before we can kind of go forward, and that's gray matter and white matter. Okay, gray matter and white matter. When you open yourself up, you're not really a lot of technicolor. You don't open up and say, wow, beautiful. It's pretty dull colors inside your body. Okay? But there is a white and a gray on the central nervous system. Either white or gray. I mean, you've already seen part of the nervous system, right? What part of the nervous system have you seen so far? Nerves, right? What color were they?
White.
White. Okay. So gray and white. Up here, I can indicate where the gray is and where the white is. This would be gray. This is white. The cell body and the dendrites are gray matter. That's where all of the decision making is taken, the messages are received, decisions are made, etc. All the activity there. The white matter is just a pathway. It's taking messages from one place to another. It's not making any decisions. It's just keeping different parts of the brain aware of what's happening in other parts of the brain. Okay, so they are pathways. The axon. So you looked at a nerve, so that means nerves are made up of what? Axon. Nothing but axon. No cell bodies. You can cut your arm, you can cut a nerve, you're not killing any neurons when you do that. Okay? All you're doing is cutting off an axon. the nerve is still alive, and it will regenerate those axons. So white are nothing but axons, and gray would be cell bodies and dendrites.
So, I have a question.
How's that? Yes.
So, whenever something is numb, is that because your axons are being cut off?
Well,
Is that how
yeah,
something works?
usually,
Like whenever you go to the
cut off,
dentist or whenever you
you
have
cut off
surgery?
the nerve activity to that, on that nerve, and maybe it is numb, but you haven't killed anything, it's just stopped. You know, sometimes if you lean on something for a long time, and your hand feels dead or whatever, you know, it's just lack of nerve impulses going out there. You haven't killed anything, it's still alive.
Well, because, what happens whenever someone's like paraplegic?
Oh, now you're talking about.
Their axons are dead?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about cutting things off,
Okay.
severing and destroying things afterwards. You sever the spinal cord, you don't have that working. So that, there you
Well, I
get
guess
in-
that's not really a good.
So that, there you're getting
question
into,
to ask.
different problems. But, some of the names I need to mention, when you hear the word nuclei, okay, that's referring to a gray area. When you hear the word cerebral cortex, that's referring to a nucleus. It's referring to gray matter. Okay. All of those words kind of go together. Whereas pathways are axons, nerves, they're all white. Okay, there's a little bit of, there's an analogy that I like to use to kind of highlight the importance of it, okay? And I'm going to use landlines, okay? This is basically a landline telephone service with a landline. That's what you have inside them, all these little wires connecting telephones all over the place, okay? So you have to use this analogy with a landline. You can't use cell phones. It won't work, okay? Let's say you have a town here, a house here in Edmond, a bunch of students studying for an exam. And you got a house there down in Norman, a bunch of students studying for the exam, and you want to communicate with each other. So you do. Call them up, and you got the phone line connecting the two. Okay? The two houses are gray matter. That's where all the important stuff is occurring. The telephone line is nothing but a conduit to connect the two, to be able to get messages from one to the other. That's the white matter. So white matter does nothing but connect two areas of gray matter. There's no decision making being done. It's just taking the message from one place to another. Okay. I think that's probably all kind of general stuff. We'll be hitting a lot of this stuff again later. So this is another overhead that's kind of deals with the same thing I just had up there. Both of them are from your book. I don't know if they're still doing that one, but that's kind of putting all those terms together. Okay, we're going to back up now to histology. So there's the neuron, the motor neuron that I drew. So what do we need to know on these? Okay, I've already talked about the dendrites, the axons, cell body, Nissl bodies. Okay, Nissl bodies. You need to know what a Nissl body is, because that's characteristic of cell neurons. Nissl bodies are endoplasmic reticulum, which you've already heard about. Endoplasmic reticulum, but it occurs in little clump-like areas, a whole bunch of little clumps. So it's the way it really looks when you stain it. And of course, neurotransmitters or chemicals, there's a lot of different chemicals associated with the nervous system. So obviously you need a lot of endoplasmic reticulum to produce those chemicals. So there's a lot of it as well. There is something that you also need to know that it does not have. Does not have any centrioles. So if you lose a neuron, you can't grow another one. Okay, it's not going to, and it can't divide. Okay, so there's no cell division. You have an axon hillock. Okay, so I'm going to send a message. Someone who's going to be the first one to tell me what this message is.
SOS.
SOS. There's a Morse code guy right there. Okay. Scouts, we used to learn that all the time. Morse code. A dot and a dash. Two lousy symbols. A dot and a dash. If you knew Morse code, and I knew Morse code, I could sit up here, I could give a whole lecture in nothing but dots and dashes. Okay? Different combination. Every letter has a different combination. So we could do that. The nervous system goes one better. It's got the dot, no dash. It's got the dot, which is the nerve impulse. All communication, this is what blows my mind. All communication is based upon a dot. Everything that you're aware of comes down to a dot. Interestingly enough, every dot is exactly the same. If you looked at it, the little nerve impulse read, every one, exactly the same, every dot. The frequency is where you're going to get differences, obviously. But even that blows my mind. How can you get that many different frequencies? And what you see, color, everything. And we're going to be doing a little bit of this when we go through the sensory system, a couple of things. We're going to say, okay, like vision, eventually everything you see is reduced to a dot, a bunch of dots, which are called nerve impulses. So that's what really amazes me on what nervous system can do with a bunch of dots. One lousy symbol. Okay, anyway, those dots are generated at the axon hillock, and that's going to be the message that goes out over the axon to wherever it's going to go. It could go to a muscle, it could go to a gland, it could go to another neuron as well. Okay. All right. There's one more thing that we want to do. Myelination. What is myelination? Okay. A myelin sheath is a bunch of cells that wrap around the axon. So here you see 1, 2, 3, 4, a bunch of cells that wrap around the axon. These are specialized cells called Schwann cells, and they're full of fat, which is white. Fat always is white. Okay? So they wrap around this. Now obviously there's going to be, wherever two cells come together, there's going to be a little place between them that's not wrapped. Those are called the nodes of Ranvier. Okay. That's what causes the white matter. So that's when you see white on nerves and everything, it's because of the myelination and the fat in those cells. That's not just the outside, and inside your spinal cord and brain, you have white matter as well. So what's the purpose of a myelination? Well, basically, as far as we're concerned, it speeds up the velocity of impulse conduction, makes it go faster. So all of these nerve impulses, it goes through what's called a saltatory conduction. It jumps from one node to the next because it can't get through that fast. So it's faster. Okay, so that's one aspect. Now I also need to understand that there aren't very many axons that are myelinated. Not every axon is myelinated. Relatively speaking, very few are myelinated. Now this is the width of the spinal cord. Spinal cord is about this diameter. Okay, you're going to be looking at it. We got it out of the female cephalotrach. Okay, if every axon that's in the spinal cord was myelinated, your spinal cord would be about this big around, probably about the size of your waist. Okay, so that gives you an idea, not very many, enough to make it white, but you don't really need that many. So it's the ones that need super speeds. Okay, faster than that. So that's myelination. All right, so that's basically all we need on histology. Except for the neuroglia. So let's go through. All you need to know are the 5 types that we're going to list up here, because they're already listed on your objectives. And one thing that they do. Yeah, I need to preface this. Remember that your brain and spinal cord are hollow. Okay, there's a space in there. Go back to spaces. Remember, you cannot visualize already. I might have a question. Name this space. Okay, it's possible for this test. They're called ventricles.